Folks, thanks for showing up today to our first hybrid Master Series session. It's being held here in Houston at the Microsoft Technology Center. And hopefully the next time that we do one of these, we can get a few more folks to come join us here. Today we have HCL Tech coming in to present on legacy application assessment and how to consider a path forward when it comes to innovation and modernization of those legacy applications. I've worked with HCL for quite a while. They are a fantastic partner of Microsoft's. And with us, we've got Chris Snyder, a technical specialist, and Jim Cook, one of the business development directors with HCL. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to them. And looking forward to today's conversation. Feel free, everybody's microphone should be available to come off mute. So if anybody has any questions, as usual, interrupt and let's make this an interactive conversation.
All right,
you guys.
Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Jim Cook. I'm the regional director for Dynamics and Power Platform for HCL Tech. Meaning that when we're working with our customers, that there is a need or a place for us to evangelize what Microsoft can do for our clients. We work with them, whether it's Dynamics centric or Power Platform centric, or even Azure. So we are a global partner. We're happy to be here today. I am based out of Dallas. So as Jeff mentioned, we're here in the Houston office today, and I strongly encourage people to find a way to come to this office because it's a pretty nice office to be in. We're going to talk about legacy application assessment and modernization. And without any further ado, I will get started. First thing I want to say is nobody's alone on this journey. These are some of the clients that we've worked with in the past. You can see their needs up here, kind of different things that we've done with different clients. And this encompasses everybody's journey on the Power Platform from their introduction to it, maybe establishing a COE and hackathons and your first Canvas app or your first app modernization program. These are some of the clients we've worked with. They all have different needs. We've had lots of success with these folks and other folks around the globe. The one thing I want to do today is a lot of names up here you recognize. I want to do a little double click on who we call AB InBev, or you may know them better as Anheuser-Busch. Anheuser-Busch, we've been working with them since they really started on the Power Platform. They came to us to make sure they got off on the right foot. We helped them with the establishment of their Center of Excellence, or COE. We've done hackathons with them. We've done a lot of work with them to make sure that they got off on the right foot, that their team was properly educated, because the idea of this low code, no code world is the idea that your team is empowered to kind of solve their own problems, solve their own solutions. And so that's what we've done with them over the years. And in spite of that success, they still have hundreds of apps that we were not able to touch, and that run their business. Maybe they are apps that came in from a merger or an acquisition, however they these apps. There was some work that needed to be done. Are these right to be moved to the cloud? Can we make these? Can we modernize these apps at all? And that's what we did. We worked with them at the high level. The first time we went through this, they had identified 27 apps really that they kind of wanted to look at and see, all right, what's the viability of taking these apps and moving them to the cloud? And I'll cut to the chase here. I won't go through the nuts and bolts of everything that we did for them. We do follow a structure. There's a questionnaire. There's some analysis that we do. We collect some inputs from the client, and then we turn those inputs around into outputs and create a strategy for modernizing going forward. But in the lower right-hand corner, I've highlighted some of the good stuff here. The 27 apps that we looked at impacted 10,000 users across the globe for Anheuser-Busch. We were able to reduce their infrastructure footprint, which creates a cost savings of about $500,000 a year. That's a pretty good ROI on these projects that we're talking about, because sometimes these projects they're not big ticket projects. But also because of this reduction, the efficiency, moving them to the cloud, they're able to reduce their overhead and their data maintenance costs by another $750,000. So with a relatively small project that does not take long to run the assessment and to kind of create the outputs, we're able to identify over $1 million in savings for them, which is usually that registers with most of the companies that we're talking to. So, and I think if Jeff didn't say it, if anybody has any questions, they're welcome to type them into the chat, and we will address them. So we talked again about, everybody's at a different place in the journey here. The idea is continuous improvement, and how do we leverage all of these tools to really optimize what we're doing inside our organization. You may find yourself at different stages here on what we call this modern maturity model. A lot of the clients that we talk to, they can get to stage 2 pretty quickly. When they get to stage 2 or step 2, they quickly realize they need to go to stage 3. And it's like, how do we scale this? How do we take this success we've had with the modern apps, and how do we make them more scalable? How do we move them out of a smaller department or a regional department? How do we make them enterprise ready? And that's what we help you with on this maturity model. And as you move along to the top, now you're into everybody's kind of thinking in the Power Platform, everybody's thinking at modernization, and that becomes kind of your default, and you're kind of starting to move away from the pro dev. But there is definitely a space for pro dev in the, with these fusion models that Microsoft has, where you've got low code specialists working with pro devs to solve business problems. So as we start working with clients, we'd say, okay, how do we modernize? Where do we start? This becomes a nice kind of checklist of what do we need to do. Probably got disconnected apps out there. If you've got disconnected apps, you've got disconnected data. Because of the decentralization that many clients have, there's probably some semblance of a shadow IT. I know that sounds very sneaky and lurking in the shadows, but there's just, it's the nature of the business. When you've got lots of folks inside an organization who are empowered to solve their business problems, you end up with that kind of shadow IT where folks aren't necessarily connected. Maybe the stuff that you've got was best of breed 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And now you're looking at, okay, it's now 10 years later, I've got to move this stuff to the cloud. Maybe the apps you've got, maybe they're not cloud ready. Maybe they're not mobile ready. Maybe they're not AI ready. We're going to see some Copilot in a little bit when Chris runs a demo that he's got. So there are all of these kind of things that need to be looked at and evaluated, prioritized as you're going through this process. One of the things I didn't call out with the Anheuser-Busch one was they identified some places where their compliance was not up to standards. But by going through this assessment, moving it to the platform, it created a critical eye on some of their processes, and they were able to kind of eliminate some of the compliance issues that they have been having. And then lastly, again, with this disparate context of all these apps that clients put together, sometimes there's no application lifecycle management strategy in place. Folks have been able to build apps or add apps to their environment, add software to their environment without an idea of how are we going to support this? Who's going to support this? So these are all things that we kind of look at as we're going through the, through the process. Once we've gone through it, all of those problems get solved. We create the applications on fewer platforms. You see opportunities for consolidation of apps, elimination of redundant apps. You're going to have better data visualization, typically using Power BI. You're going to be able to run more analytics, better analytics as you're going through. People are going to have access to those analytics. Maybe there's a CSAT score involved in kind of your applications. Maybe some of this stuff is customer facing or customer adjacent. So there's an opportunity now that you've got this unified kind of single pane of glass looking at more of your applications. You can certainly increase CSAT scores, whether it's internally with your internal users or external clients. You've got better business intelligence. I mentioned the improved security and compliance. So that's where the upside comes in doing this. At the end of the day, you've got lower total cost of ownership. You've got modern data management on a single platform, or certainly in fewer platforms. And then more importantly, you've got the analytics and the leaner teams. So, and if there's any questions or anything, feel free to put them out there. Other companies think, okay, now that I've got this information, I know this is a need. Where do I start? Where do I begin? There's a couple of places that you can begin. These are when we talk about some of the older applications that are out there that were best in class 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it may be. These are the applications that are out there. These are some of the most common applications where people come to us and say, help us move our processes from Nintex into the modern app world. Help us do the same with Tableau. SharePoint is there are a lot of folks that have stretched the limits of what you can and should be doing with SharePoint. So we certainly like to go and help those folks realize that, hey, this is a good application. This is a good use case for SharePoint. This stuff that you're doing in SharePoint right now, maybe this is a good place that we can move some of this information up into Dataverse. Excel, we all know that Excel is used tremendously throughout the business world. Getting that into the cloud, making the data more accessible to a broader base of users helps drive that richer analytics. That's kind of been a theme through what I've been talking about here. And I want to mention SAP. We know that's the 800-pound gorilla. Nobody's going to get rid of SAP. But there are connectors out there that we have available that allow you to enhance what you're doing with SAP. We can put Power Platform front ends on SAP. We've got connectors that will reach in and allow a broader group of users to access some of that data and some of that information that's in SAP. They can reach in, they can access that data, they can extract it, manipulate it however they want. And then they can push that information back into SAP. All permissions need to be in place though, but that is something that we can do. So we're not always necessarily talking about moving SAP 100% to the cloud, but we're giving you access to it with some of the connectors and some of the automations that we can make available to you. And if maybe these applications aren't registering with you, or sometimes when people want to figure out how do we modernize, maybe it's more of a geography. Maybe it's our well services organization has a wide array of apps. They have grown through acquisition. They've acquired all the technical debt from the companies that they've acquired, or maybe the subsea group similar. Maybe the West region has been the Wild West, and they've got an array of applications that nobody really has a handle on. So we can start by looking at those regions, looking at those groups internally inside the organization, and we can do the assessments there. So these are just kind of some of the strategies that we can bring. Typically, when we do engagements like this, there are, we like to pick a subset of apps, not try to, drink from the fire hose. If you recall that Anheuser-Busch one, they identified 27 apps that they wanted to do. We really find anywhere 50 to 100 apps is a good kind of starting point to go in, assess those apps. And then what we do with that information once we get it is we'll basically work with your teams, and we figure out, okay, is this a technology type app? Is this process? Is this more functional? So we kind of categorize them into those groups. And then we figure out, okay, who's using these apps? And we let IT go in and talk about the importance of the apps. We let IT talk about the complexity of the apps and what they do and what are the outputs of these apps. And then we do the same thing with the business team. So everybody's got a say in kind of ranking the importance of these apps and what we're going to do with them. And then the outputs from that are kind of what we call that complexity assessment. We prioritize the apps. We work with you and we say, hey, these are the apps that have been identified. This is kind of where we think the complexity is. This is what we think our strategy ought to be going forward. And then our outputs from that are are these apps that we can decommission? Do we need to archive these or sunset them? Are they something that we want to replatform? And that kind of looks like this. So we get those outputs and then we say, okay, we're going to consolidate some of these apps. Maybe you've got redundant apps. Maybe we've got apps that we don't need anymore. We can kind of shrink the footprint of the application landscape. We can transform some of these apps. And some of these apps are They can be reconfigured, reworked so that they are more cloud friendly, maybe more mobile friendly. We can leverage some of the Copilot and some of the AI technology that is coming down the path now. So there's a lot of things we can do. Some of the apps, like SAP we were talking about, it's not going anywhere, but how can we enhance your ability to get more from those apps that we're not maybe moving to the cloud? And then finally, there are apps that we're just, hey, this information is in SharePoint. We want to take it out of SharePoint. We want to put it up into Dataverse. So there's lots of different ways that we can kind of handle what we want to do. The important thing is we identify where the problems are that we want to solve, and then we prioritize them. We figure out the complexity, and then we generate the outputs. And from here, we put together the plan to basically modernize the applications. So I will pause there. If there's any questions or any discussion, we're open for business. And then up next is going to be Chris Snyder, and he's going to extend this conversation a little bit. But he has actually got a demo of kind of how you can put this to work in action.
And we do have one question, which I'm going to try to get to during that next segment as well.
All right.
So far. And is there any other questions? Now, if we come off mute or jump in.
I'm gonna stop sharing.
All right.
So while you guys are shifting, just a quick question to everybody, a small poll. How familiar are you guys with the Power Platform today? Are most of y'all using it right now, or are you starting to dip your toe in the water? Yeah.
Some people in the room are very familiar with it.
Yeah.
And while you're doing that, I'll give a quick introduction as well. Chris Snyder, solution architect on Power Platform, and been working with Dynamics and Power Platform for the last 15 or so years. Before that, I was a full stack application developer in both .NET and Java. So kind of come from that pro dev space and have found that, the enablement, as we'll get into today, of the modern app development platform that is Power Platform to be a fantastic for the pro devs, as well as seeing a lot of success around, having those makers come up through maybe business analysts or even power users at times.
He saw the light.
I did. No, I really did. 4.0, I won't go all the way back to that. But, never write CRUD code again. Yes. Do that. How are we looking on familiarity? Because I don't want to cover ground that everybody.
Yeah, so it's across the board. I think most people are kind of middle level.
Okay, well, then we'll just kind of dive into it, but knowing that, there's a number of facets to the Power Platform. We're obviously all very excited about the AI capability of Copilot, the ability to automate just about everything now with over 1,200 certified connectors. Apps come in several flavors, as well as that portal capability, and everyone's been using Power BI for so long now. So jumping ahead, how is the business getting that value? Along the bottom, you'll see a number of case studies around how modernizing to Power Platform yielded tremendous results, but that ability to have agility with enhanced experience, right? No longer are we just stuck in, say, an old app that we've been maintaining for a decade or more. Now we've got this ability to surface the forms over data in a number of different ways. Today, we're going to see 2 different ways on the same data, right? So that's quite a bit of agility. And as I mentioned, with that pro dev background, I've taken a number of folks through, they were senior .NET developers, and getting them up to speed in Power Platform, it's a very natural fit, right? They're able to map all that experience that they bring, quickly get up to speed. And as we're going to see today, Copilot's making that even faster, right? And then a reason that IT loves Power Platform is because it already fits into the security tools that they're using, right? With Azure Active Directory, now known Entra, right? The governance that they need to ensure that data is not escaping the enterprise, Microsoft's commitment to responsible AI, as well as a number of pro dev friendly capabilities to have Fusion Dev, right? Our pro dev is working on the pro code stuff, and our, business analysts are able to leverage and reuse those capabilities. Meanwhile, all of this is built with accessibility in mind so that all users are able to access that data. So it's really been amazing over the last 2 years how far AI has moved this idea of app modernization and modern app development. English is literally a programming language, right? It used to be way back in the day, punch cards with machine language. For the last 10 or so years, C# and JavaScript have been ruling the day. But now we're going to see how we can actually build working applications with just using English prompts. And I did want to point out, so 2 years ago, where we found Power Platform was the barrier to entry was a little bit higher, right? So the skill level you needed started around the SharePoint level, right, up through Access, and then all the way on the right-hand side, you're well into the pro dev space, TypeScript, JavaScript, C#, all of those, pro dev capabilities can be leveraged in Power Platform. But fast forward to today, and you can see how Copilot has really democratized. It's bringing it down to the level where users comfortable with Word, PowerPoint, and Excel are now able to jump in and leverage the capabilities of the Power Platform. So with that sort of as our intro, I did want to walk through a scenario, right? So with app modernization, you might find a number of different scenarios in the organization. Some are going to be large enterprise apps that are going to take teams, larger teams, months to build. But some others are going to be these smaller apps that, they're mission critical or we just can't live without it. But maybe it's a smaller, faster replacement. So we've been able to extract the data in this scenario into a spreadsheet, right? Or maybe it even started in a spreadsheet. But in this case, I've got 12,000 rows of data extracted from this system around airport management and services, right? So let's see how we can use that to build an app, right? And so this is where, with AI as our Copilot partner, here we are in the Maker Studio of Power Apps, maybe familiar to many. For others, maybe the first time seeing it, but we're going to use this feature here, start with data, right? And down here in the middle, we're going to create with Excel, right? So we know we have that Excel file. Actually, is that showing up? Yeah, right. So we'll find that file. And Copilot's going to take a look through the data, and he's going to make some assessments about the data in that. What he's trying to do is he's building out a table for us in Dataverse, right? So he's looking at it, and he's come up with some identifications. You can see here, the name of the airport is a string, pretty easy to figure out, right? So as we slide across, the schedule, is there scheduled service? He's picked that as a Boolean, right? So if we wanted to see, we'd be able to come in here. He says, okay, there's only 2 options there. So we're going to turn that column to a Boolean. If we slide all the way right, latitude and longitude, rightly picked a decimal, right? Because we want that. And here, I'm just going to make a quick little correction. This is annual fuel consumption, and I don't need 8 positions of precision. I really just wanted this to be a whole number. So we'll be able to work with the Copilot to add what we know about our data as we're building this out. So you'll notice here, the next step, create the app. So it's going to take that spreadsheet with 12,000 rows of data, move it up into our Dataverse environment, and then build the 3-view app, getting us started. It's a great starting point. I can tell you 2 or 3 years ago when I was kind of first learning the ropes on Canvas apps, and it was like, I'm always staring at this blank canvas. And it was like kind of daunting. What do I do with this blank canvas? Where do I want to take this? Well, now we've got this great starting point, and it's that jumping off point to add your creativity. I think I've been seeing where the reviews on Copilot is it's something like 70% of people say it's helped them start the creative process, right? As opposed to having to come, draft an email, write an SOW, using that AI to be that starting point on a topic is such a great lift. So there you go. Just like that, we've built our very first app with nothing more than a spreadsheet as the input, right? And you can see Copilot is already hanging out on the right-hand side. But if we want to go ahead and get a feel for what this app can do already, look at this, we can hit the play button. Let me scale it down just a little bit so we can see the whole thing. And we've got these great built-in capabilities. Like we're in Houston today, so let's see. Yep, looks like the identifier didn't come up. So we've got a little bit of fixes to do there, but you can see how it responsibly scales down into a mobile-friendly and with a simple app deployment model of being able to share that app. So we can now extend that to folks that are maybe mobile in our organization. And with all that security built in, we still maintain all that security. So with that, let's see how Copilot can help us extend. So let's, kind of take on the role of maybe that .NET developer. I'm a pro dev, but I haven't worked with Power Platform before. So I've got some ideas, but I don't necessarily know how to execute on them, right? So let's see if we can add in a screen. So let's add so you guys are following along, bottom right-hand corner. I'm using the Copilot control on the right-hand side to ask Copilot to help me build this out, right? So add a new screen for Copilot. So we're going to use Copilot to add Copilot. So he's taking that prompt and he's trying to consider what features or what new components do I need to add. And see on the left-hand side navigation, he's added a new screen. I'll go ahead and pick a layout and I'll just say, let's use just a header and footer. And while he's rendering this out, we can then go ahead and add in our Copilot control. So here I'm just adding a Copilot control into the little canvas spot he's built out for us. For a moment, we'll see if we can get this layout. So let's see, I think we want to make this width set by container. We'll go ahead and stretch him, flexible height, so we get the full effect. And we'll connect him to the data source that we've already created, right? So see how easy it is to tie in. Again, just starting from that spreadsheet, we now have a Copilot. So we've got a Power Apps Copilot now built into our app. Now, the one thing that we don't have is we've got two screens. And so I know, how am I going to get my users to navigate between those two screens? So again, being that new to Power Apps, I'm not exactly sure how to do that. So let's ask our Copilot on the right-hand side here. Can he add a button to show the Copilot screen? Now, I didn't do myself any favors there because he's going to put it somewhere I didn't mean to. No, actually, he did all right. He did all right. Better than I expected. So the one thing, his UI skills maybe could use a little benefit, but he dropped it in a workable place. Let's make our workspace a little bigger, and we'll just call this show Copilot. And if we look at the code that was generated for us, you can see right here, again, I wasn't sure what Power FX function I needed to use to be able to switch screens. Here I can see Copilot's put in navigate, and he selected the Copilot screen that we added before, right? So English really is a programming language, right? So now, if we were to go ahead and save this. And while this is processing, what we'll do is we'll play this and we'll see, did we build an actual working app? And We have this great ability to preview the app before we publish it. So that allows you to work in a much faster iteration. Back when I used to have to compile it and deploy it, or maybe use the build automation tools, and it was minutes for each cycle. You see now we have these ability to quickly view and tweak these changes. So let's see, did it work? It did. And we can even see if we can ask it a question. Let's see, what is the highest elevation airport in Virginia? My home state. I don't know if I mentioned that. I am from Virginia. And so by connecting Copilot into our Dataverse table, he's looking through the table of data that we shared. And sometimes it does take him a little while. So he has not actually had a full chance to index the results, but you know, what ends up happening here in about 5 or 10 minutes is he actually does find that highest elevation airport is Inglesfield in Virginia. So for the purposes of a demo, sometimes these get a little compressed. So with that, I'll pause. Any questions so far about what we did? And I do want to get to the question about the macros as well. Are there any questions?
So one of the questions that was asked in there, and we've kind of addressed it through the chat, but you started off with Excel data and it built a database in Dataverse. Is there a way that we can use a different database when starting from Excel?
When starting from Excel?
Right.
So my thought around using Excel as the demo was it's fairly easy to extract data into a format. It will work with Excel or CSV, right? So if you're coming from a SQL database or any number of different Oracle, wherever, pretty easy to get that data extracted out into CSV. And that is the format that Copilot can work with most readily. Now, there are a number of ways to build these tables out. Again, this is the super shortcut, right? Can you imagine building an app 10 years ago in, what was it, about 7 minutes that's mobile deployed? Like, I can't. So this is that hyper fast scenario. Now, if you've got that bigger line of business application, it's got multiple tables of data, you're going to take a different strategy and a different approach. But one of the things I find fantastic, one of the newer features here is something called the preferred solutions. And I don't want to dive too deep into this whole idea of the pro dev landscape, but we just built a bunch of things. Where did those things go, right? And how do we deploy those things, right? Because we're working in maybe our development, our sandbox, and so we're going to actually end up having to move those to production. So here I have my solution. It's kind of like a container, right? Already set up so that as I'm working with Copilot to create new flows and tables, and we can refresh. Oh, he is refreshing. Okay, we're just a little slow. So you can see the table and the app, the security role, and if we built flows, those are all just automatically populating into my solution, making it that much easier for me to then deploy. So these aren't just kind of scattered all over the default environment. So just a real nice convenience feature there. And again, back to that question about what would we do if we had these other tables of data, we would be building these tables into our environment, building potentially process flows to bring those in, right? So the number of data, Azure Data Factory, Power Automate, number of different ways, just Excel imports are very easy ways to load data in. And it kind of depends on the application that you're working on that day.
And this is shareable from the sandbox, right?
It is. It absolutely is. Right. And that may be appropriate. Again, if this were a small departmental app with no more than a dozen users, this might suffice, right? We might have built the app and we can turn the inspectors loose on it, right? So while we're in here, what I wanted to also give you a look at was we built out that Canvas app view of the data. It's got some great features. Mobile enable is the one that comes to mind most often. But sometimes you want to do a bit more with the data, right? So we're going to use that same table of data, but we're gonna look at it through a model-driven app. So let's go ahead and spin up a new model-driven app. And we'll just call this we'll go with airport information, we'll call it the admin app, right? Kind of to denote that maybe we're gonna do a bit more with this data. And by using model-driven apps, now we're gonna unlock thousands of features that we don't have to build out. We don't even have to ask Copilot for, but we're just gonna automatically get them because we're in this forms over data app layout. So just by adding a page saying we're gonna work with the Dataverse table that we just built out from an Excel spreadsheet, should be right about, let's just type it in airport and see what. There's our airport information table. You want to show it in the navigation, and we've already got the same WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get feel to the app layout. Right, we'll go ahead and save this new app, and just like before, we can, well, actually, not just does for model driven, it does make you hit publish, but it's so helpful. It guides this novice.NET developer and me through the process very easily. So even when you kind of bump into something unfamiliar, it's there to kind of guide you along. So again, with app modernization, a lot of strong suits that you get in the Power Platform with Canvas, with model driven. And here you can see we've got quite a rich layout of data, and we've got the ability to personalize this view, right? So we're in Texas today. So what if I wanted to put in a filter, right, for just the airports in Texas? Maybe that's my territory. That's where I'm going to work. So we're looking for the let's put it here then, filtered by Texas. And by putting that filter in and then hitting the save as new view, so we'll say these are the Texas airport information. Now I've customized my model driven app for me, right? Again, just wanted to illustrate the power of being able to work with data from multiple different facets, not just Canvas, not just models, so we can kind of combine these for potentially different roles, right? Where we did want to be able to, export this data out now, right? We have these capabilities built in the model that with Canvas we can get there, but we'd have to build those out. So in doing these app modernizations, we also help you map sort of those capabilities. Whenever you can get an out-of-the-box feature, you absolutely want to use that. But if you need to have the export on the mobile app, then let's do that in Canvas and let's come up with that creative solution. So questions or different ideas? You can see, built in to the model-driven experience is that same Copilot. I'm dying. Probably shouldn't do this in my demo, but I'm a glutton for punishment. What is the highest elevation airport? I want Copilot to succeed in Virginia. I've been to it. It's a really cool airport on the plateau level. There it is. I knew Copilot could do it, right? And in model driven, it actually even points me to it. So if I click on this link, now it's taking me right there. So what I'm finding with these Copilot controls is, yes, you can find that information if you use a bunch of filters on that last view. But if you just have like a data curiosity that you want to satisfy, right? Or, give me a top 3, right? All of these capabilities that you can now easily achieve through conversational language. So while we're talking about conversational language, we could kind of pivot this over to Copilot Studio if there aren't any other questions about this one.
There's some questions that are showing up in the chat around using legacy macros, which are currently unsustainable.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did want to cover those. So that's a great question, right? We see Excel. It was probably the low code tool of choice for the last 2 decades, right? who hasn't built too many macros and had, you know, a 20-tab spreadsheet? So when I think, you know, you could map that concept of macros into a combination of Power Platform capabilities. Canvas apps give you that ability to embed low code, what they call Power FX, as well as pro code abilities. So some of those macros can get quite complicated. I'll bet you can probably call web services with macros. I haven't, but I'll bet you can. In those situations, you're going to want to be able to architect outside of just, you know, your Canvas app to probably something reusable like an Azure function with built-in authentication and stateless serverless implementation. And from there, you know, you're back in the realm of the pro dev, but you're going to be able to build out whatever's needed, whether it's reaching out to, you know, a legacy line of business application, or, you know, computing something very complicated. So it just really depends on what is that macro trying to achieve. Is it just doing calculations on the data itself? Then there's no need to go outside of Power Apps. But if it's doing anything that's even more complicated, then your architecture probably includes something like an Azure resource component.
And I would add that it also depends on the use case.
Mhm.
So a lot of times dealing with Excel macros and things is they're taking source data and then they're using the macros to do a bunch of manipulations so that they can visualize the data in a different way.
Mhm.
So if we're just looking at manipulating data to see it in a different way or different outcomes, or the massaging of data, then I always highly suggest using Power BI from the Power Platform, because what you can do is build a Power BI data set, create DAX measures that are very, very similar to Excel formulas, but they actually live in the data model. And then you have the choice then, you can either connect through a Power BI report, you can build a report on top of it for the nice visuals. But if you're more of the analytics person that says, hey, I just want to see the data in a spreadsheet, you open up Excel, you click on your get data, and you connect to the Power BI model, and then you can visualize it and pivot it all in Excel while leveraging all the DAX measures and all the power of the Power BI engine underneath it, and your front end is Excel. So it depends on what you want to do. If you just want to visualize data, Power BI. If you want to interact and change or take action on that data in some other system, then either Power Apps and or Power Automate may be a combination. But yes, there are lots of solutions. Totally depends on the use case.
Great point. And I did want to highlight.
Thank
So
you.
AI talks very
Sorry.
native. Oh, go ahead. Is there a question?
Oh, yeah, I was the one who asked that question. I just wanted to extend. Thank you. I think that makes total sense. One of the things that we wanted to see is instead of just going and looking at the code, because those were built like long back and the same person doesn't exist on the team. So the one of the thing is we have to go and look at the code, make sense out of it, and then rewrite. So even if the Power Platform doesn't fit for that given macro, we have a couple of things. But let's say if we just want to translate that, and it says, okay, you have some source and it can fail. The Copilot can fail, saying, okay, we don't know what the source is, but it continues. It gives us a flow. Now we understand from the Power Platform what's happening, and then we definitely decide connect to the different data sources or use Power BI for visual. That's fine, but at first place, we want to look at what the macro is doing instead of going and investing additional time. Is there any use case that you guys tried like that, where you just import the macro and it just tells you what it does internally?
So if I understood the question correct, is there any use case where we started with the Excel macro and it was just kind of diagnosing what the macro does from a code standpoint, and then what the outcome is? Was that accurate?
Right. With a simple Excel, how it makes sense that, okay, it's supposed to be a Boolean looking at the different values, all that it does, right? So similarly, I'm expecting, yes, you start with macro, it diagnoses everything, and then it makes sense and it puts some flow, some code there, saying this is what your macro is doing and this is what it translates to in Power Platform. So now we know what it does at least. It's just that we don't have those input source data. We don't have those visual representation fully. I hope that makes sense from what I'm asking.
I think so, but I'm not 100% confident. So let me approach it like this. Generally, we don't. So I work with customers day in and day out on use cases, whether we're doing a proof of concept, a hackathon, a use case review. if the use case starts in Excel where we've exported this data, we have it in Excel. Actually, I have one coming up at 2:00 that is on this premise. And what they're doing is they're taking a bunch of data from Alteryx. They've exported it to Excel. They are then manipulating that data and then doing calculations on that data out the other end. We typically don't start at the Excel and the macro level. Typically, we start at a much higher level. Like, what are we doing around this process? What are our desired outcomes? And then how can we make this better and automated? So in this instance, what we're doing is we're actually connecting to the original data source so that we skip all the manual export to Excel and all the manual data manipulation. And we're connecting straight to that data source. We are bringing it into Dataverse rather than Power BI because we want to create a Canvas app on the front end to manipulate that data for modeling purposes, right? They want to be able to say, well, if we change this, how does that affect our outcomes? And if we calculate it this way, how does that affect our outcomes? And if we do this, how does that? So they want to be able to model with that data. So some of the data will be static, some will be manipulated. Now, those calculations that we do, this gets a little bit more complicated because they want to see the charting aspect of that. So we're bringing the data into Dataverse, and then we are putting Power BI connected to Dataverse using direct query so that as we're working with it, it is refreshing based on the changes that we're making so that we can visualize those outcomes and use Power BI to do it. So, and we're recreating those macros. We had a choice. We could either recreate them in Dataverse, and some will likely be recreated in Dataverse as calculated columns. Others will probably be DAX formulas because they're more complicated in Power BI. Because I love Dataverse, but Dataverse cannot do all the advanced calculations and the advanced language that we can do in Power BI. And so that's why we're using Power BI on that visual layer for not only the visual capabilities, but then some of the advanced DAX measures that will be needed. So it's less about the macro and more about what are we achieving through Excel in this? What are we driving? What's the behavior? And is Excel the best option? And sometimes that answer is yes. But a lot of times we can automate these things and give a nice, pretty GUI for us to manipulate those numbers and see nice trending charts that give us our forecast models and all that. And we can get to a resolution of what we need to do much faster. Because in this customer's case, they do these spreadsheets, I think they said quarterly, and it takes 3 days of time from when they export the data to getting all the numbers in there, summing them, doing all these things, and then creating the calculated additional sheets out the other end on the kind of what if we did this, if we did this. And so that's 3 days of effort, and we're hoping to condense that down and build a solution one time that is automated so that now the effort is just the 5 minutes to open the app and run through the tool and plug in the numbers that they want to plug in. Did that kind of make sense?
Yes, it did. So yeah, it needs a lot of work around, so it won't be. So I wanted to understand if macro can be an input. So what I see is, yes, I mean, it may or may not make sense. If it's a simple macro and just looking at some Excel, it's fine. But if you have something complicated and calculations, and you have to design it differently, break it differently,
Yes.
define your data sources, right?
Yeah, because typically what we want to do is kind of get Excel out of the equation, just because the solution is kind of trapped in Excel, right? And then we get multiple versions of spreadsheets. It's very hard to manage. It's very hard to have visibility and things like that. On the answer of the macro, a lot of times, so I've taken a lot of spreadsheets with macros, and a lot of time that is some Googling, right? That is, okay, here I've got this macro expression. What is it doing to the data? And then what are either the Power BI DAX or the Dataverse or Azure functions that I could use to manipulate that data? And then which one should I use? That's the consultative. It depends based on what we're trying to drive, right? Because the great thing about Power Platform is there are 5 to 10 ways to do anything. And so it's great. We have all this flexibility and there are pros and cons of each one. It's also a huge downside because there's no one right way to do anything. It all depends on the use case and the pros and cons of what we're trying to do and which is the best solution for that specific use case. And that's what where the complexity comes in.
Makes sense. Thank you. Thank you for answering.
Yeah.
So one of the other areas now that we've got our data moved into Dataverse, right? Now it's time to sort of unlock that last capability of how do we leverage generative AI now on top of our data or maybe existing knowledge bases. So here's another scenario, again, still in this aviation theme of the virtual assistant. We've set this Copilot up with a couple of generative AI sources, right? So one website and one rather thick PDF file of the Federal Aviation's regulations, which are written with, the best legalese that is the most confusing you can possibly find. It stumps many of us pilots figuring out, am I allowed to do this or that? So let's try asking this chatbot, this Copilot, a couple of different questions to get a sense for how the generative AI leverage these sources for this application. So we'll say, how old do I have to be a pilot? So we didn't set up in the old ways of setting these up. We would have to put in numbers of topics and try to make a guess at intent. And here it's going to use the generative capabilities to understand the intent from a number of different phrases, and then it uses its resources that it has available. So for your organization, you might have this internally pointing at a SharePoint knowledge base, or it might be a publicly accessible website like it is in this case. And here it's giving us a very reasonable answer. It says you have to be at least 16 years old to be a glider or balloon pilot. For airline transport, 23 years, and it's giving the sources that it found so that you can look it up and validate it, right? And one other question, just to kind of show a different source that it finds is, well, how many night landings do I need, right? So something very specific. Imagine, 2 years ago, training a co-pilot, or what used to be a PVA, to be able to do that. And here he says, okay, well, I poured through, and this time I found the reference in that PDF that you gave me. And it even allows you to be able to see the chapter and verse of where they found that information. As you can see, if you read through there, it's pretty complex stuff. So it's very helpful to have Copilot be able to look that data up. So again, now we're into that realm of generative AI, and there's a number of capabilities here, which I'm sure you guys are going to continue to kind of dive in. We're sort of at getting close to our time for the demos today. But again, happy to engage on questions.
So I won't admit to this, but hypothetically, internal to Microsoft, we might have created copilots that are pointed at the public documentation for something like Power BI, and then maybe uploaded all the different PDFs that are under the white paper section of the Power BI site into a chatbot. So every time we get asked a question, instead of having to go to Google, find the answer, type out the answer, give the supporting document back to the customer, maybe we just copy and paste their question into this bot. It does all of our work for us, and we copy and paste the output after verification, right? Because this is Copilot. It's AI assistant, verify the information is correct, and then we copy and paste it back and send it back. That might happen. I can neither confirm nor deny, but that might be. So if you have those kind of use cases where, you're kind of the subject matter expert and everybody keeps coming to you instead of just going and looking through these, whether they're Word docs, PDFs, internal SharePoint sites, whatever, you can absolutely build a Copilot to either front end it and say, hey, go ask the Copilot instead of me, or continue to be the hero and just make your life easier.
Can we point I'm reading from the chat, can we point a Copilot at both internal and external data sources and get a response?
Mixing the two?
Mixing the two?
Yes, absolutely. So, and then, and that breeds us into a dangerous territory where there are Copilot for M365, for Microsoft 365, right? And then you have custom Copilots. And on the Copilot for Microsoft 365, it automatically has access to all the data in the graph. And what is graph data? So when I use Copilot, it is looking at all the files I have access to in OneDrive and SharePoint. It's looking at my emails. It's looking at my Teams chat. It's looking to everything that I have access to. So it respects security. And so everything I ask it is grounded in what we call the graph data. So by default, it has access to all of that internal stuff. And so when I ask it questions, and I can turn on a web plugin or turn it off, it will include outside results and internal results by default. The rub is kind of where you get into scoping, where you say, hey, when I ask it this question, I only want it to look at specific things. You will be able to do that through extending it in the near future, not today, but in the near future. Build is next month. Stay tuned. But in a custom Copilot, absolutely, you have way more control, way more flexibility. And you can set up those boundaries of exactly, hey, these are the files, these are the doc repositories, these are the public sites that I want you to look at, and you have that finite control. So again, it always comes back to what's the specific use case, what are you trying to do, and then we can kind of guide you in the best solution stack to get there.
Today, I've actually been able to figure out that if you're asking the M365 Copilot something about data that you've configured the plugin, if you add to the end of your prompt in the context of whatever you named your plugin, it'll use that. You're almost telling it where to go and what to use, right? But if you don't leave that, then yes, it'll scour the internet, it'll scour your plugin, it'll kind of go back and forth. So
Yeah.
Just some ways to potentially see the use today.
Yeah, we can get into a big deep dive into how the orchestrator works and plugins, and we got 5-6 hours, guys.
I think we are just about out of time, but I did want to kind of show one more capability back inside that Canvas App Maker Studio. Again, not as familiar, right, in that .NET transitioning to Power Platform. How do I add a new variable? Because maybe I'm replacing that macro and I'm just kind of getting my feet wet with it. I love how it's basically a Bing search with the context of Power Platform curated right inside the studio. And so it actually talks you through the two different ways of using this, what we call the set function, shows you a little example, right? And how you can use update as well, right? So again, just
an answer
for app modernization, Power Platform checks so many of the boxes for so many of the apps. Not all of them, right? Some of them you're going to migrate across, using Azure resources intact, but for others where you're ready to replace, this is a pretty compelling way to do it. So with that, I will.
Yeah, good stuff.
That's great demo.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, guys. So thanks for everybody that joined remotely. We are in the process of working on May's session for the Master Series, which is going to cover all things Dataverse. So keep an eye out for an email from me or your Microsoft seller coming soon. But if are there any other questions before we end the meeting? Does anybody want to come off of mute for any follow-up?
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm curious if it's possible to control which environments have access to the Copilot for Makers prompt or the general availability Copilot features. I would love to keep those in personal dev environments and turn them off in other environments.
You want this one?
You go ahead.
No, go.
You're a big talker. Go.
No. I've hit my quota. Go ahead.
So yes, I mean the answer is yes. You can absolutely do that. Sorry. Yeah.
And it's funny that you say that. And so the answer is absolutely yes. And the funny thing is that we actually have an internal struggle. So as you can imagine, us being with Microsoft, we have MSIT is our IT overlord organization, our internal Department of No. And so we have custom environments. And when Copilots came out, we were like, yeah, we're going to build all these custom Copilots for doing all this stuff internally. And they were not enabled in our environment. And we have been just in a fight to get them enabled So just to show you that every company is the same, everybody has these struggles. But yes, they can absolutely be turned off. Thought maybe people would find that funny.
Good question, Harrison. Any other
Yeah.
questions?
One more question on the same topic. Is it a simple matter of like a tenant admin hitting a switch, or what does it take to customize the availability of Copilot features per environment?
I don't have my laptop, or I dropped the documentation in the chat.
What's not? I'll look it up.
So speaking of Google search, real quick to find the
Okay.
documentation and drop it in the chat. Here we go.
So one question on that, how is Microsoft actually handling governance of that, or other companies, partners, how are they handling the governance of these different co-pilots? Seeing that you mentioned the overlord kind of controls enabling these aspects, just interesting from that aspect.
Governance is always a very deep topic. In fact, you know, if you've been in Power Platform community and you followed certain people, so Microsoft has the MBAS, the Microsoft Business Application Summit, and you might have seen specific people from specific companies present. You may have noticed that they are now employees, and they might have gotten, you know, on the project management team that owns governance and delivered things like managed environments. So my advice here is listen to the product team's direction and how they think managed environments and governance should work and how you should go to market. Do not do what we do. So one of the fun things of being a Microsoft employee is customers are like, oh, we want to do it how Microsoft does it because Microsoft must do it best. No. In fact, we learn a lot from doing it wrong. So I would say that there are definitely things that we do very, very well on the governance front, and there are some things that we do very, very bad. But that we should set up a dedicated conversation because it's typically at least an hour to go through governance and how it works. And then an additional hour to kind of talk to, hey, you know, what is your corporate structure? Or how are you guys structured? How are you laid out? How do you want it to work? Because the first part is, how do you want it to work? And then we tailor governance to meet you where you want it to work and how you want it to flow. And what I've seen is every customer is different. Some customers might be very similar, but there are differences across every customer. So there isn't a magic recipe. There are some common levers and tools, absolutely, but that process is different. And leveraging the new managed environments is just a gold mine. The problem there, or I shouldn't say problem, the barrier there is that is a premium capability, right? So it also depends on where you are on your journey. Are you leveraging a lot of the standard capabilities that are included in the Office 365 SKUs, or have you gotten to the premium capabilities and that's now kind of the core aspect of your delivery? It was a long way of saying I don't have a good answer for you.
Yeah, that's the onion. So yeah, I appreciate the feedback. So that is helpful.
Yeah, so I'm hoping the Master Series we get more into the governance. I know that Ken has been on before.
Yeah, and I just posted that into the chat. So
Ken has been on before talking governance, but that is where I always advise. This is where you contact your Microsoft team and say, hey, we're really big on this Power Platform stuff. And if you guys want us to invest in Power Platform and buy more licenses, we need help with governance. We want to sit down and go through this. Because I can tell you on the TS side, we love having this conversation. So we will absolutely have it.
Thank you.
And Vincent, I just put a link in the chat as well to a session that you may have missed a couple of weeks ago around governance and security within the platform itself.
Awesome. I'll check it out. Thank you.
Cool.
And Ken might have been the person that I was referring to.
Yeah. All right, if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and in the meeting, I will be distributing a link to the presentation and a copy of the recording by the end of the week. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks again, everybody.
I do have one question.
Sure.
Okay, so I've seen these low-code solutions come and go, even from Microsoft over the last 20 plus years. What's the long-term strategy on this? And I'm just kind of concerned if we give our business this power, if something happens. I'll give an example. Was it something just got discontinued, Xamarin, right, from Microsoft? So I just don't want to get stuck in a situation where we're going to require the business to maybe transition to a new solution later on in the future. But what's the long-term plan for this?
I feel like he just called us Silverlight. So I can tell you, I have been here 18 years, and I have seen things, Silverlight, Xamarin, and to be fair, we bought Xamarin for specific reasons. InfoPath, another one, right? There's still customers using InfoPath and like, hey, how do I migrate this to SPO, SharePoint Online? There is far too much invested in the whole Power Platform space, right? Especially around Dataverse, Power Apps, Power Automate. You can look at the trajectory. So if you look at the acquisitions that we made in Power Automate, like around RPA, robotic process automation, and what we're doing. So you can always tell Microsoft's direction by, hey, how many features are coming out? How invested are they? What acquisitions are they making that they're folding into the platform? And how much is it growing? And it is growing like crazy. So it is definitely here to stay. It is not like Xamarin or InfoPath where it's very niche and it can be replaced. It's not going anywhere.
Just remember the foundation for the Power Platform on like the app side and the data side is also used in Dynamics. So as we continue to invest in both of those sides, or rather we continue to invest in the foundation, both product solutions reap those benefits.
And the real bare metal too is it's built on Azure resources, right? Azure SQL, Azure Event Hub.
I feel like I remember a presentation where someone in the product group was saying that Power Platform is the largest consumer of Azure resources.
Yes.
And I think there was a list of like 30 Azure resources that make up the Power Platform. So it's very intertwined, and I just don't see it going anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, one more questions. So have a bunch of applications which is not part of.
Uh-oh, we lost you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep, got you now.
So my question is like, will the Copilot will help us to create a container-like solution, like unmanaged solution and the managed solution, make a kind of some specific connection reference through the admin perspective. Will they have the capability to do that, or it's been there? I'm trying to explain because there are some application which is not part of your specific container or solution. Would like to move this legacy application to the organized way. So I'm just looking for this answer here.
So the question is can you use Copilot to take an app that is outside of a solution and add it to a solution?
Yeah, then that's great. Yeah.
Ooh, I don't know. I haven't tried that one. You guys tried that?
So I haven't tried it, but I'm trying to think where Copilot is today, like in the product, and I don't know where you could ask it to move.
Right.
Yeah.
Like move an app or a solution. Like even today, if you built an app outside of a solution and then you move it in a solution, it's all through the GUI.
Yep.
You're just click and drop. So I mean, maybe you could use RPA to do it, but no, I don't see a functionality today to go tell Copilot and move XYZ app into ABC solution.
So
I want to say,
Okay.
I heard Shan MacArthur there talking last week about a new capability around the solution checker, I want to say, is kind of in that space, right? Where you've got your app in the solution and it's doing a really deep dependency check now. And I believe it does the auto add of dependencies. I mean, it always kind of had that, but from what he was describing, so it's not Copilot.
Yeah.
But it some of those
Yeah.
safety rails in the platform.
I know some of the dependencies did get a recent improvement. I saw that a week or two ago.
Yeah.
So Copilot, and so again, being here for a long time, when we release stuff, and Copilot is in a V1.
Thank you.
When we release stuff, it is always first focused on consumable features, what we would call business value features, right? And so the admin side always kind of suffers, right? If you look at how long Power Platform has been around and how long it really took to get good governance features and things like that, it took quite a while. So what I would, the pattern that you should look for is that as Copilot integrates more across Power Platform and has more and more features, at some point it will then start transitioning to the admin side of the house to help do administration and governance and things like that. But I would not expect it in the near term, simply because there's more work to be done on the business value side of helping create applications and get from nothing to business impact, help accelerate that. And so until they have that really, really well implemented, then they'll come back and start doing the IT admin and governance side and adding Copilot capabilities and features in there. But it's always the first focus is on business value and getting that stuff done. So I fully expect it coming and talking to different members of the PG. It's definitely in the vision of the future. But with V1 and what's coming, they're still highly focused on accelerating the time to value and helping making it easier and removing the barrier, right? So it will come. It's just, don't hold your breath. It's going to be a little while.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And that's a guess, by the way. That's totally an opinion. I have no inside knowledge other than a few off conversations.
Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question.
What JJ told me.
Sure, what's up, Harrison?
Is there any chance that Copilot can be integrated with the ALM accelerator to co-pilot my pipeline deployments?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's one I have not asked or seen asked in product group conversations. So could it? Yes.
Yeah.
Is it on the roadmap? We don't know. We may have to follow up and give an update in a future master series.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to think who I would go ask. Yeah, we got nothing. We got nothing.
Yeah. Hey, Harrison, it's JJ. I work with you guys. Let me find out.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you.
Okay, no worries. The ALM accelerator is pretty advanced for us anyway, so I was just curious.
No, that's
So,
interesting.
so this is Daniel. There is a co-pilot for Azure DevOps, which speeds up ALM.
Cool.
Folks, any last minute questions? All right. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hmm.